Hi everyone. I presume you can all hear me okay. My name is Neil Bruton. As you'll notice on the slide, I'm actually the third name on the list. The presentation was meant to be made by Dr. Theo Lynn, but unfortunately he was taken away at the last minute for personal reasons, so I'm here in his stead. I did take part in the research that went into this presentation, so hopefully I'll be able to convey the presentation as well as he had, but I have only seen it in the last couple of days, so hopefully I'll be able to answer any questions you have, but if not, that's the reason why. A bit of my background: I've been working in Dublin City University for the last year and a half, and much of my work has been around open education resources, and so I'm really happy to be here among so many experts in the field of open education resources. For the last year, I've been doing a capacity building project with teachers with funding from Nominet Trust and Cambridge University Press. We've been running online sessions for teachers trying to build their capacity in open educational resources, where they can find them, how they can use them, and how then they can create their own. But I'm not here to talk about that today. I'm here to talk today about justifying institutional investment in OER development, and we're going to try and justify it by using OERs as a marketing vehicle for the institutions themselves. So I was listening to Hal Plotkin earlier, and he was talking about how we should all be going to our government officials, going to our public representatives and trying to convince them to fund our OER initiatives. I'm coming from Dublin, Ireland. I can only speak from my experience, but in Dublin, or in Ireland, we're currently facing into a new budget in which the government are trying to cut 15 billion worth of spending for a country where there's only 2 million taxpayers. And I really can't see me going to my local representative and trying to say to him, oh, this initiative is really good, it's about open education resources. He probably won't even know what I'm talking about. I can't see him increasing or lobbying to increase funding in this area. So we're thinking maybe we'll have to try and justify spending in OERs by institutions and justify that in a different way. We see that being marketing. So a bit of the background. Myself and Theo, who was the original going to make this presentation, we were at OER 10 in Cambridge there, I think it was in March, and Theo actually went to a presentation by Malcolm Reid where he actually put forward the argument for marketing as justification for institutional spending on OERs. And he came back to me very excited after hearing this presentation and really thinking this was a theory that could work. But then later on in the conference, we attended a panel discussion on the same topic, and the idea of marketing didn't come up at all. I mean, there was justifications given in terms of this is a new type of learning, it can increase the benefits to learners, it's more inclusive, etc., which are all good reasons to justify institutions spending money in this area. But we felt that the marketing idea was a really good one, and it was being neglected, and that's what spurred this research that has eventually produced the paper and has produced this presentation today. Just the format the presentation is going to take, I'm going to go through a bit of the background, talk to you a bit about hybrid messages and classical brand placement frameworks. So these are marketing frameworks, but as I'm going through them, try and think, how can these be applied to open education resources that you guys are all working with today and in your jobs. Then I'll go through a few OER examples. So some people who are developing OERs, I'm going to show you some of them, and you'll be able to see that some of these frameworks are already in place. Some of these people are already marketing their institutions in their OERs. They just might not be saying this to their institutions and saying this is why you should be funding it, because we can ultimately then maybe attract more students, etc. And then I'll go through a few of the next steps. Okay, so background. I'll gladly be corrected on any of this. I know David is here. So funding for OER projects remains a challenge. I mean, I heard a stat that MIT had to spend 4.3 million between 2008 and 2011 to fund their open courseware project. So it remains a huge challenge. And how do we justify this investment? Speaking from my own experience, I'm working in Dublin City University. And if I went to them saying I'm looking to develop these open education resources, money is tight at the moment. I don't think me saying it's really beneficial and inclusive to learners, I can't see them saying, okay, that's fine, go ahead, we'll pay for that, we'll invest the money. So I think we need to find new ways of justifying that investment. So these are some of the ways that David saw in his 2007 article, Models for Funding OERs, and I won't go through them all now, but basically, I'm sure David will correct me if I'm wrong, but the last three there, conversion, institutional and segmentation, have an obvious commercial outcome. So I'm going to look obviously at the institutional model, and I'm going to try and justify marketing as a reason for investment by the institutions. So higher education institution marketing is changing. It certainly is in Ireland, and I think it is worldwide as well. It's becoming far more competitive. We're seeing students adopting a far more consumerist approach to selecting a higher education institution. They're far more savvy about what's out there. They're looking at the price, they're looking at promotion, and they're looking at program specifics. They're able to find out a lot more about programs around the world. They're not just looking at the one that's closest to them and going there. They're looking at the prominence of academic staff, and they're also looking at other additional benefits that the institution can give them. And traditionally beforehand, higher education institution marketing assumed that the prospect would have no experience of the educational institution that they're looking at. They may be looking to attend in the future. However, I think that open educational resources provide an opportunity in this respect. They provide an opportunity for the prospect, the student that has not yet experienced that university or that education institution. By looking at an open education resource that university has created, they'll be able to get an idea of the type of education they're going to get there, the standard of the content that they're going to receive there, the caliber of the lecturers that are going to teach them in that institution, etc., etc. So I'm going to talk to you a bit about hybrid messages. So these are paid attempts to influence audiences for commercial benefit using communications that project a non-commercial character. So there are things you'd know, product or brand placement. We've all seen in movies, in TV programs, we've seen product or brand placement. Program tie-ins is where someone pays for advertising while a program is on, and then the program will use their product in the program in a non-commercial way. So, for example, if Coke paid for advertising outside of a program in the ad breaks, then the characters in the show might be drinking Coke, etc. So program-length commercials, that's like infomercials you might see on television for a product, which is a whole 30-minute segment or an hour segment, which looks like a TV program, but it's actually a commercial for a product. And then masked messages, this is where a perceived expert in a certain field will be talking about a product, but he's actually being paid to do so. He's not just speaking from his expertise position. So think about these things in terms of the open education resources that you produce or that you see on a daily basis. Is there room for these kind of things in those open education resources? Audiences may not be aware of the commercial influence attempt and therefore may process the content of such communications differently than if the communication was more overtly commercial. So we have to think about how we input this marketing into open education resources. It can't just be carte blanche, having pop-up ads appearing in the middle of open education resources, because that's not going to work. People will be turned off. So it may be in the form of a banner at the top, it may be an introduction before a piece of video, etc. We have to think about that as well. So this is a very complicated framework which I'm not going to go through entirely, but it's basically one that was put forward by Balasubramanian in 2006 for product placement. And I'll just pick out a few of the factors. It's basically the execution factors you can see there on the top left. These are things you can control. So if you're creating a TV program, you can control these, or if you're creating an open education resource, you can control them. So execution flexibility, how easy is it to get the product placement or the branding into the vehicle? Does the person who's watching or reading the open education resource, have they the opportunity to process the placement Well, they do if you have the banner on top of it as they're reading it. They can see it and they can process it. Placement modality, so can you put it in audio? You can. Can you put it in video? Can you put it in image? So that there is this opportunity in open education resources. Below that, then, you also have individual difference factors. So these are things that you can't control in creating the open education resource in this instance. So things like judgment of fit, appropriateness, strength of link between the individual and the open education resource, or the individual and the higher education institution that's creating the open education resource. And a really important one is skepticism towards advertising. So when you're creating your open education resource, you have to really think, are the people who are reading this or viewing this skeptical towards advertising? Is this going to put them off? So we have to do this in a subtle way, but also in a way that puts forward the message about the university. And then, so these things lead to a certain type of processing by the viewer or the user, and then hopefully that leads then to some effect. In the case of brand placement, it leads to sales, to purchase intention, brand usage behavior. In the case of OERs, we are putting forward the thesis that it leads to students thinking, well, maybe I'd like to study at that university. This content is really good. I'd like to experience that more. And we'd be saying to our institution that's a reason why we should be creating open education resources and a reason why we can justify it. So just a couple of examples. This one is from the University of Westminster. They actually presented at OER 10 in Cambridge, and that's where I actually saw this. They create micromedia flash presentations about how to create video. Their whole course is on creating video, multimedia videos. That's their whole course. But they've also shared a whole load of training videos online, open content for anyone who wants to view them can view them and can learn essentially what you learn on the course. But when you view those videos, you'll see there top left constantly when you're viewing the video is University of Westminster. You'll see on the top right there, study an MSc degree in multimedia with the Multimedia Training Videos team. Meet the team, info about our courses. So constantly as you're watching the open education resource, you're constantly seeing this was made by the University of Westminster. I can find out about a course I could do with this because this is really good. So maybe I want to actually study for the degree in multimedia and I can learn more about this and follow through on this really good content that I'm seeing for free. So another example was OpenLearn. The same thing again. As people read through the open content, they can always see this was made by the Open University. I can study at the OU. I can learn about the OU. I can even research at the OU. So we think there's a direct link that if the content is really good, then we can justify to our institutions, well, look, you can then attract students to your institution through creating this really high quality content. This is a less good example that we've seen. When you actually go to the page where the open education resources are available on the University of Colorado's page, that's fine. They have branding at the top. It says PHET, support the PHET there. But when you actually go into the open education resource and go to actually look at it, the branding suddenly becomes really small. And so while people are actually getting the benefit from the open education resource, looking through it saying this is really good, they're not at the same time associating that directly with the institution. And then lastly, the institution we think are probably doing this the best, whether they know it or not, I don't know whether they've thought about this themselves, is MIT. When you go onto the page where the open source resources are, you immediately see their branding, sign up for their news, donate now. When you actually go into the resource, this is 5. Well, I have a video, but my time is running out, so I won't show that. But basically, this is the start of the video. So when you click onto their open education resource, which in this case is a video of a lecture, before the video actually starts, they have this comes up, which tells you about what the course is, tells you this is lecture 1 of a course that you can actually take if you go to MIT. It has their branding at the top, branding at the bottom, and this is before the open education resource has even started. And then when you actually go into the resource, it's a lecture, and the first 5 minutes of this resource is spent with the lecturer saying, how great a lecturer he is, how great the other lecturer beside him is, how great the course is going to be if you decided to take it, etc., etc. So I'll finish with this. Hopefully I've got the message across to you. Obviously we're not trying to say that the only reason institutions should engage in open education resources is to get more students. I don't think that, and we don't think that. I'm just saying that this is a way that we can get around, when money is tight, we can get around institutions saying, look, we don't have the funding for that. I know it's a good thing to do. It includes lots of other people who otherwise couldn't get that education, but we don't have the money. This is a way we feel that maybe we can get around that. So I'll finish with just some considerations for any of you who are creating open education resources or obviously looking at them. Is your university brand given appropriate prominence? Where is it positioned? Is it visible at all times? We found that top left is the best place to have your branding, and as you've seen in the examples, that's where they were generally positioned. Do you have secondary call to actions visible? You've seen that in some of the examples. Study with us, donate to us. Are they OER related? Are they course related? Are they institution related? Do you introduce your OER program and reference your institution? So in the MIT example, they had a slide up before the video which specifically had their branding and referenced their institution before you even get to see the open education resource. Could you use multi-modes more effectively? So could you have an audio introduction before your open education resource, just saying, this is a resource from Dublin City University, you can study a full course here in this topic, or whatever. Maybe that's too overt, I don't know. Do you create or use the relationship between your institution and the content? Does the author presenter and the content, the author or presenter and your institution? Do you reinforce institutional brand or content choice? Does the content induce positive or negative mood attitudes? And lastly, what marketing impacts could your OER be linked to? Are you measuring the right performance metrics for your institution? So when you go to your institution and say, look, we've created all of these open education resources, and then maybe you'll have to look at what have they then done. So can you say enrollments have then increased in a certain course based on the open education resources that you've created? For example, the first example I gave you there was the University of Westminster, and they said that they actually doubled enrollments just down to their open education resources. It was a course that was actually going out of business. They weren't going to be able to run it the following year, but then through their open education resources, they were able to double enrollments, and they were able to keep the course going, but also were able to keep sharing their content with a wider community. So at that, I'll call it a day. Thank you very much for your attention. It's been a pleasure to speak to so many experts in the field of open education resources, and I'd welcome any questions or insights that you might have.
Any questions for me? You say the best place to put the logo is the top left corner, so why didn't we do it?
Yes, a good question. I should have done it. I'm going to say that I didn't actually make the presentation. Theo did, and because I was drafted in at the last minute, I of course would have had the logo in the top left. But
logo at the bottom centre.
He wouldn't like to hear me saying that, but that's my excuse, and I'm sticking to it.
Did you say a course that wasn't too popular that once you put it, made it available as a whole?
Yeah, this is the University of Westminster. It was a multimedia course, and he said that the course was actually going out of business. It was nearly gone. He was worried that they wouldn't be able to run it the next year. He started sharing these OERs online. They were videos. It was basically the content of the course, but he was sharing it worldwide with anyone he could. And he said that enrollments then doubled the next year. He was ready. He was expecting at least the same the following year, and all down to the open education resources, he said.
That seems like something huge.
Yeah.
I mean, virtually everyone should pounce on it. I would think that if you make materials available, if that happened, or if there is.
Well, yeah. Well,
is that narrative? Is that included in? Do you know if that's in the paper?
I actually don't think it is in the paper, but that's something we can obviously explore.
If anyone's studied that would be like from
Yeah.
academic, especially to
That's what the next talk's about.
So I've led nicely into David. That's I didn't know I was, but that's good that I have.
Any other questions for Neil? Okay.